Hello everybody, and welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the 2024 presidential election and what I think the best case scenario for Joe Biden would be if the election were to be held tomorrow. Again, this is not my prediction, this is not what I think is going to happen, but it's always fun to do these scenarios. I think they're really interesting because they kind of show us kind of the edge of the coalition, or in other words, how far could Biden go. And again, I'll be doing this for Trump next video, but I think we'll start out with Biden because he is the incumbent, because he did win the last election. I think that gives us a good starting point. So, again, if you take a look at the 2020 election map, Biden won 25 states, and trends do exist. Obviously, some states are trending towards the Republicans, and many of the states that voted for Biden are long-term trending red, but that does not mean that in a best-case scenario, any of them would be likely to flip to Trump. In fact, I'd actually argue right now that none of the states he won in 2020 are likely to flip to Trump in a normal scenario. So in a best-case scenario for Biden, he would not be losing any of these states, especially if they voted for him just 4 years ago. So we're going to go ahead and fill out this map here with the states that he has already won in 2020. And again, some of these states are going to be closer than others, but I think broadly speaking, you're going to get the idea pretty quickly here. So that would put Biden at 303 electoral votes. And again, I'm varying the margins. I think Nevada would probably be the closest of these states. Obviously, it would be a lot closer than a state like Oregon or Illinois or New York, but he'd started out at 303. And on the contrary for Trump, he'd still be winning a lot of states, obviously. I think you could give him the 3rd district of Nebraska and the at-large vote by a safe margin. He'd also be winning a bunch of states in the Deep South. Mississippi, he would not win by over 15 in the best-case scenario for Biden, but it would be kind of along those lines. Same thing with Missouri and Indiana. They'd be safe for Donald Trump, but they would be under 15%. And so that leaves these other 130 electoral votes in a best-case scenario for Biden more in play. But I do kind of want to get out the states that are already in play that in a best-case scenario Biden would win. And I think the prime example of that would be North Carolina. North Carolina, to me, is a state that Biden has a good chance of winning in 2024. Is it a state that I think he's going to win? Not necessarily. I think if you made me bet right now, first of all, I wouldn't bet on North Carolina this far out because it's such a close state consistently every year. But I would say that Biden would be a slight underdog there. If you take a look at 2020, Biden lost it by about 1.3%, which isn't bad. It's certainly doable over the span of 4 years. And again, if you look at where he improved from Hillary Clinton, he's doing well in most of the population center. He did better in Charlotte. He did significantly better in Wake County, which is where Raleigh is, and there's a lot of votes there, as you can see. And the good thing for Biden in North Carolina next time is that he's going to likely continue to do better in the areas that have more of a population. But unfortunately, it's an uphill climb because, again, he lost the state in 2020. And there are areas that are trending red, specifically the areas up here, which are actually predominantly black. These areas have been Democratic strongholds for a while, and they did vote for Biden for the most part. But again, they're getting redder. And turnout is a big problem for Democrats here because if they can't get good margins out of these counties that are smaller but do add up over time, Trump's going to win North Carolina again. So Biden's path in North Carolina for 2024, I'd say, would be to continue to max out the suburbs. You need to do better in Mecklenburg, need to do better in Wake, because those are the two large population centers in North Carolina. So again, if he can get good turnouts from those counties and continue to win over white voters in the suburbs, that's a good path for him. But he'd also need to maintain stronger margins with black voters. Because again, in 2022, Democrats did pretty well broadly, but one of the areas they struggled was in the South with black voters because they saw decreased turnout in those districts, specifically up in this region of North Carolina. So I would say Biden has probably a 40 to 45% chance of winning North Carolina in 2024. Absolutely doable. In a best-case scenario, he would take it. And then I would say another example of state that I think he would take narrowly in the 2024 matchup in a best-case scenario would probably be Texas. Texas is, again, a state that I think Biden won't win in 2024 unless something goes horribly wrong for Trump. But it's easily doable, and you can look at it by just looking at how he did in 2020. So in 2020, Biden lost a lot of ground along the border with Mexico, specifically in these rural counties. Zapata's a good example. It actually swung like 40 points towards Trump or something like that. And that's pretty crazy to think about. But the good news for Biden is that this county doesn't have a ton of people. Again, we only saw about 4,000 votes being cast there in 2020. And that's not good for Biden that he's losing 40 points compared to 2016. But I would say that when you take a look broadly and where he's gaining, it's much better for him. So, for example, Tarrant County swung 9% to Biden. That's a county that cast over 800,000 votes. Dallas swung 6% to Biden. That's a county that cast 900,000 votes. If you look at the San Antonio area, the county that San Antonio is Bexar County, and Bexar County swung 5% to Biden. That's another big county. The county that Austin's in, Travis, that's already pretty blue, but it swung to Biden by 6.5. So, again, he's losing ground in these areas in the southern part of the state, but they don't really have enough people to offset gains he's making in Dallas and the Austin-San Antonio region. And so, for Biden to win Texas, he'd have to continue to make gains in the Dallas suburbs. These two light red counties, that's Denton and Collin counties, these are counties that voted for Trump by small amounts in 2020. Biden would probably need to flip them in any scenario in which he'd win Texas. So, he'd need to continue to do well with voters, specifically voters with college degrees who live outside of Dallas and Austin and San Antonio. And ideally, he'd be able to hold ground in the South. I don't really know how these areas are going to vote because I think we just don't have enough information to tell yet. But I will say that there's a path for him to win Texas, and it runs mostly through the suburbs. And that's doable, but not the bet I would be making. Now, on the contrary, I think I do want to eliminate a few more states. And there's states worth talking about because they could be close in a scenario in which Biden does really well nationwide, but they wouldn't flip. And I think the best example of those states would be states like Kansas, Utah, and Montana. These are states that have historically been open to voting for Democrats, especially Montana, because Montana still is a Democratic senator. It had a Democratic governor until 2021. And so you can make an argument for Biden getting close in Montana, especially if John Tester does win that Senate race, and if he has some sort of coattail effect. We could see Biden winning it or losing it by 7 or 8 if he does really well, but even then, he wouldn't really be close to winning it at all. Utah and Kansas, these are left-trending states. They're, again, will be close, I think, in 15 to 20 years, especially Kansas, because Kansas, if you look at the areas of it that are trending left, these are the bigger parts of the state, and so broadly speaking, Kansas could be a blue state in 20 to 30 years, but for now, I would say Biden can't really win it in 2024, not at all. So the next place I would go is probably Alaska. Alaska, I think, could be within 5 if Biden does really, really well there for some reason, but it does not have any realistic chance of flipping. We saw Mary Peltola win the congressional race there last year, but that doesn't really mean anything for Biden. Peltola was a really good candidate for Alaska, and Biden will probably do fine there in 2024 no matter what happens, but Alaska is not ready to vote blue yet, and I would say, kind of a similar thing for the 1st District in Nebraska. This district actually, I think, only voted for Trump by 15 points. I don't know the exact margin because it's not a district I've focused too much on, but it voted for Trump by 15 points, and it's left trending. If you look at the areas of the district, and you look at where it swung, it's kind of like this ring around Omaha, and most of these counties did trend blue. So Biden would probably, in best case scenario, maybe lose it by 9 or 10, but it doesn't really matter. He wouldn't, in any case, win it. And so that leaves these states in the eastern part of the country, and I think these would all be really close in the best case scenario for Biden, but I think he only would realistically win one of them, and that's Florida. Now, Florida, to me, is interesting because it's a state that I think, Democrats will not win Florida in 2024. If Biden does win Florida, I will be shocked. I'd probably delete my channel. I'd probably, be, stupefied. But Florida is kind of, I don't want to say sleeper, but I think that people are so, down and out on Democrats in Florida that they don't want to think about the possibility of it going blue ever again. And so Biden's path in Florida is simple. He's not going to do well at all in Miami-Dade County, but Democrats have been really doing pretty well. Actually, they won the mayoral race in Jacksonville. It was an upset. They won it by 4 points on Tuesday night, and that was kind of a surprise to me. I didn't cover it on this channel, obviously, because I don't do mayoral races in cities in states that I don't live in, or cities in general. Really, the mayoral races in the state I live in aren't really that interesting. But Jacksonville was good for Democrats because they won a race they were not expected to win. And we also saw Democrats do weirdly well in areas they didn't get crushed in turnout. Because in 2022, the biggest problem Democrats faced was they were unable to turn out their voters. And we saw the electorate that voted for DeSantis by 19 points voted for Donald Trump by 10. So yes, DeSantis did really well, but that's just because Democrats didn't turn out. If Democrats had turned out at the rate they turned out in 2020, which was still not that good, but if they turned out at the rate they did in 2020, he would have won by half of what he won by. So, say Republicans have a much worse turnout advantage than they did in 2022 or even 2020. I think Biden could easily get it within 5 or 6 at that point. That's my actual prediction for now. And I think the remainder of that would probably come from some sort of incumbency boost with Hispanics, excuse me. And again, that is not something I would predict to happen, but what I will say is that historically incumbents have done better with Hispanic voters. So Biden has like a 10% chance of winning Florida in 2024. It's really good results in Jacksonville, Tampa, and Orlando, and just saving anything you can get out of Miami. And if that happens, he'd win it by like 200 votes. He would be like the reverse Al Gore in that he'd win Florida, but it would be very narrow. And so that would get him to 389 electoral votes. He'd still lose Ohio. He would still lose Iowa and the 2nd District of Maine. I don't know as much about it because it's not a statewide election, but it voted for Trump by like 9, and it's a right trending area. I don't see why Biden could win it. But specifically in Iowa and Ohio, these are states that are really conservative socially. Democrats had a good midterm in the Midwest this year. Like, they swept offices for the most part in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and they were not able to win anything in either of these states except for, like, I think the auditor election in Iowa, which is not a real race, bluntly. So that would be my best case scenario for Biden. Again, this is not what I'm predicting by any means. I don't think I'll ever predict this. I know someone's going to take this out of context and feel like, wow, you think Biden's going to win Florida? You're an idiot. And, like, yeah, Biden's not going to win Florida, but I think that, like, when you look at it mathematically, you can, like, if everything goes absolutely right for Biden, he could win Florida. So that would be my best case scenario for Biden. Again, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Tell me, do you think he'd be able to win Ohio or Iowa or Maine 2nd District? Maybe he'd lose Florida. Maybe you want to switch around a few states. Either way, let me know what you think, and I'll see you all in the next video.